Noctowl's PvP IVs have been a really hot topic lately in Pokemon Go, mostly because Noctowl has been performing really well in the competitive Play Pokemon Championship Syndicate, and Noctowl recently had a Spotlight Hour, and Noctowl recently got buffed with a Wing Attack generating even more energy. So Noctowl was already on top, already talked about a lot, and now Noctowl is even better, right? So if you want to know what the best Noctowl PvP IVs are, I do have a guide covering the topic, link up above and in the description, the Noctowl PvP IV deep dive. But the controversy that I want to address here today is the rank 1 versus attack weighted Pokemon, the Swag IV Pokemon. Because as people are talking about these attack weights more and more for Noctowl and other species, we do have the rank 1ers in the midst saying rank 1 is best, oh those IVs are perfectly okay if you don't have the rank 1, and that I'm possibly misleading people by promoting these attack weighted Pokemon when the rank 1 is so much clearly better. So there's been some drama, there's been some controversies that unfortunately me and my mouth have gotten me into on the Twitterverse, and I figured rather than barking back and forth at people, it could be more productive for me to just make a video here laying out all my thoughts and feelings regarding PvP IVs and the rank 1 being best or better, basically spelling out what high stat product and the rank 1 is and what it isn't, so people can kind of understand my perspective a little bit more. One thing I do want to highlight too is that I'm not so close-minded that I think the rank 1 is bad, or that, you know, the swag IVs are always better than the rank 1, or that stat product is a bad metric to follow. It's just that it has its flaws, and I don't think the rank 1 is always better than the swag IVs. But I think, you know, the rank 1 and high stat product Pokemon definitely do have their place. So, you know, I am pretty open-minded about this, but when it comes to like online Twitter debates and stuff, it can come off that I'm very close-minded and opinionated on it. But at any rate, let's just get into some of the arguments that people have in favor of the rank 1s and why they're not exactly 100% true. So starting out, we have one of the most common arguments in favor of rank 1 or high stat product Pokemon, and that is that high stat product Pokemon have more bulk than attack weighted or lower stat product Pokemon. So to kind of spell this out a little bit better, here I have a graph showcasing the top 500 stat product Pokemon compared to bulk product. And you can see that there is a general trend with stat product. The higher stat product Pokemon generally seem to have the higher bulk product, but you can see that the line's all zigzaggy, right? There isn't precision there. There can be some pretty wild differences in a Pokemon's bulk compared to where they are in stat product. If I zoom in on the top 100 to 500 Noctowl, basically the further you stray away from the rank 1, the less it's going to correlate with bulk. So if you zoom in the top 100 to 500 here, you can see that there's like very little relationship for the most part compared to stat product and bulk product. Like the rank 100, for example, has significantly lower bulk product compared to the rank 479. Now, if somebody asks you, hey man, what has the higher bulk, the rank 100 or the rank 479, you'd be inclined to believe it's the rank 100 because it's got better stat product. It has to have a lower attack stat. It has to, you know, have more bulk. But clearly that is not the case. And even when you zoom into the upper echelon here, the top 50 Noctowls, if you look at the rank 44 compared to like the rank 16, the rank 44 has more bulk product than the rank 16. You'd think the rank 16 would be more tanky, but the rank 44 is in fact tankier. On top of that, the rank 1 in this case isn't even the bulkiest Noctowl, the rank 2 is. So stat product can trend with bulk generally, but it doesn't precisely equal bulk. And the further away you get from the rank 1, the highest stat product Pokemon, well, the less it's going to track with the bulk product there. So I think it is like factually incorrect to say that higher stat product Pokemon are bulkier than lower stat product Pokemon. And then when it comes to the swag IVs, I do spend a lot of time in my PvP IV deep dives. In fact, probably the hardest element to prepping my PvP IV deep dives is going through all these different matchup scenarios, different energy weights, prior damage, you know, swap advantage, shield advantage, energy advantage scenarios for Pokemon, and making sure that they still have a good level of bulk going on with the stat weights that I'm recommending. So it's not so simple as just saying you got this stat, you got that stat, or you got this stat product, and you're going to be a bulky Pokemon. A way to simplify this whole situation is just looking at what stat product is. Stat product is attack times defense times HP. Attack is an element of stat product, where bulk product is just defense times HP. there's no attack element involved. And while attack does have a more significant weight on the CP formula, which results in lower attack weighted Pokemon generally having high stat product, the further away you deviate from that upper echelon, the more the variations in a Pokemon's attack stat can influence their stat product, causing these big zigzags to happen in the graphs. So, is stat product always the tankier option, always the more safe option? That's kind of hard to say. I think that if you're trying to take it easy, you're not trying to worry about every possible scenario, you don't want to get super deep with the PvP IVs, stat product is perfectly fine to follow, but to use that as a way of saying that swag IV Pokemon or certain attack weighted Pokemon are worse than better stat product Pokemon, that's not exactly the truth there. So usually from this point, the stat product people backpedal a little bit and they say, oh, well, it's got the most amount of stats, so it has the most amount of potential to, do stuff well and get wins and stuff like that. It might not be the maximum bulk, but maybe that attack stat can do something, right? And I want to be a little pedantic here, right? But the highest stat product Pokemon don't have the most amount of stats 100% of the time. Just like with bulk product, there is a trend, a general correlation, but it's not precise because, attack times defense times HP can result in, different numbers being more important, where if you're looking at stat sum, it's attack plus defense times HP. Just like with this bulk product situation, some Pokemon have higher stat sums than the highest stat product options. So if that's the case, why do people follow high stat product then? Well, the primordial reason for high stat product, which occasionally the rank 1ers will know of and will bring up, is that stat product does have a positive correlation with total damage output in a vacuum. So way back when, like 4 years ago when PvP was first coming out, stat product was the way to go because we didn't know about breakpoints really. We didn't have PvPoke in the early days to find these breakpoints, and it was a relatively long time before PvPoke updated enough to make it kind of easy to figure out what these breakpoints are. So way back when we didn't know a whole lot of things about PvP, stat product did have a positive correlation with total damage output in a vacuum. The problem that stat product has with TDO in Pokemon Go itself, though, the reason why it's not a perfect way of looking at things is because we have damage rounding and HP rounding in PvP. So you're not dealing like 1.2 damage or 1.8 damage per fast move. You're dealing 2 damage because it rounds. I don't know if it rounds up or down, but the basic concept here is the damage is rounded. So it doesn't matter if you have a 58.2 or a 58.4 attack weight. If you're dealing the same damage, it's not significant. But all of a sudden, if you have a 58.8 attack weight, you're dealing 1 more damage per fast move. Well, considering what the meta is, what Pokemon you're up against, that could be significant for those matchups, right? And it is entirely matchup dependent too, which is a lot more complicated than looking at just raw TDO in a vacuum here. So basically, because we have stat rounding and because we do have a meta of like 10 common Pokemon, the expanded meta is like roughly 40 somewhat common Pokemon, different stat checks are more significant for some matchups more so than others. And as a result, it's not perfectly trending with stat product anymore because we're trying to meet these specific integer values. So as a result, you have situations where, the rank 59 ends up being better than the rank, 47 because it meets a certain defense check. It meets a certain attack weight, right? And so as a result, stat product doesn't correlate with, TDO all that well any longer. I'm sorry if this point kind of goes a little bit over some people's heads, but like the basic idea is that, we're not taking 1.2 damage, we're not taking 1.8 damage. It's all rounded. So as a result, there isn't a perfect correlation between stat product and performance. Now at this point, usually the rank 1ers are kind of at a loss, It's not the maximum bulk, it doesn't have the most stats, and TDO really isn't a thing because of stat rounding. But you know what, Mr. Swag? The rank 1 is still the rank 1. And sure, your bespoke swag IVs, they might be the best IVs right now, but when the meta changes in the future, they may no longer be on top. But the rank 1 is still the rank 1. The thing I love most about this argument is that there's a concession here. And the concession is that the swag IVs are better than the rank 1 right now. They just admitted to it, right? But they're telling me in some wayward future, the Swag IVs may no longer be on top. But the thing is like they're the best right now, right? And in the future, who's to say that the Swag IVs won't be even better? Who's to say that the rank 1 won't be even worse? Now, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what all nerfs, buffs, and new releases are going to come out in Pokemon Go. But if it's good right now, who's to say it's not going to be good tomorrow? Now, there are some interesting examples, in relationship to this, of a Pokemon's goofy attack weight getting better with time. We have the Giratina Altered form, Dragon Breath Giratina in the Ultra League. Way back when, like 4 years ago, you wanted an attack weight on your Dragon Breath Giratina because it could get a breakpoint on Swampert. And back in the primordial days of Ultra League, getting that attack breakpoint made it so Swampert was no longer as good of a safe swap into a team that has Giratina. Giratina could counter swap on Swampert a lot more effectively, dealing that 1 extra damage per fast move onto the Swampert there. Now, time has moved forward. We have XL Pokemon in the meta. Things are way different in the Ultra League, but for Dragon Breath Giratina Altered form, the attack weight picks up wins or more consistency against Talonflame with the XL, Best Buddy Umbreon with the XL, and it still doesn't lose other matchups or significantly loses other matchups in a way for this higher attack weight to not be so valid. So in the past, 4 years have passed, right? Dragon Breath Giratina with an attack weight was good then, and Dragon Breath Giratina with an attack weight is even better now, right? Now there are situations where things have changed a bit for a Pokemon in regards to their bulk. We have Altaria. Way back when, in the primordial days of Great League, and basically up until Trevenant came out, maximum HP Altaria was arguably the best Altaria, the 0015 in particular, because it really wasn't losing any matchups because of its lower defense weight, and the higher HP weight allowed it to dominate opposing Altaria in the mirror matchup, as it got CMP, and it had enough HP to outlast the other Altaria by just 1 HP. Provided lag didn't screw you over, right? Also at this time, there was another competing bespoken Altaria, and that was the Altaria with a maximum attack weight that had at least 139 HP. This attack weight would allow it to overcome Wish Caches more consistently. It allowed it to get the most CMP potential against opposing Altaria. And if your opponent doesn't have the 0015 in particular, then you'd still be able to flip those same matchups or tie those matchups against opposing Altaria, save for the 0015 because they'd survive with just 1 HP. Well, time has moved on. Trevenant came out, and Trevenant has an attack breakpoint on Altaria that makes Altaria think about its defense more. What remains the same for Altaria throughout the years is having 139 HP and having that high attack weight. If you check my Altaria PvP IV deep dive, link up above and in the description, I go over this in more detail. But yeah, for Altaria, 139 HP and having a high attack weight remains consistent. Now Altaria also has to think about having a bit more of a defense weight so it can protect itself against the Trevenant. Now, does that mean that the 0015 is bad, or the maximum attack 139 HP Altaria are bad? Well, no, they still have their own unique stat weights and their own unique advantages compared to what you're trying to do with your team and what kind of meta you're going into, which is to say that, yeah, PvP IVs can be very complicated if you're trying to get these like niche kind of advantages over your opponent based off of the stat weights of your Pokemon. So then what are you supposed to do then? Build like 4 Altarias? And well, it is something that high ranking players do. For example, the reigning world champion, Dancing Rob, has 4 different Altaria IV spreads. Enhoff had the rank 1 Altaria, but actually built and elite TM'd the rank 7 Altaria just to get an attack breakpoint on Trevenant for the Peoria Championship. Yeah, you might want to have different stat weights on your Pokemon to address different metas more efficiently. And if you do check out my PvP IV deep dives, I'm not recommending one particular IV blend for most species. Most often, there are going to be 2 or 3 different stat weights that I'm recommending for people to build based on different advantages. For Noctowl, for instance, there's a high bulk job that also gets the Galarian Stunfisk breakpoint. But then you have the Azumarill Slayers, the ones that get the Azumarill breakpoint, and some of them can get CMP on Medicham, right? They have their own advantages, but they don't have the level of bulk to be considered high bulk. So depending on what you're trying to do with Noctowl or what your personal kind of strategy or preferences for a Pokemon, you might want to go for that higher bulk weighted blend. Yeah, and then you have the truly crazy stuff that 20 Butters is putting out there, the super attack weighted Noctowl. Depending on what job you want your Noctowl to do, different IV spreads can be better. So to kind of bring this back to the rank 1, like I said at the beginning of the video, I think the rank 1 and high stat product is perfectly valid. They do have their advantages at times, and sometimes in my SwagTips PvP IV deep dive, I come to the conclusion that like the rank 1, 2, or 3 end up being the best possible Pokemon. It's not always that way, but it does come out that way sometimes. So I don't think that stat product or high rank or something is invalid, but at the same time, I don't think swag IVs are invalid just because the rank 1 can be better at times. I really do think it is just coming down to the stat weight and the job that you're trying to do. But to take my, 11 herbs and spices and say that they're invalid because the rank 1 exists and the rank 1 should be better in this miracle infinite amount of possibilities, I don't think that's exactly fair to me, and I think it's pretty dismissive of all the hard work I do going into these deep dives. And in a way, it's arguably misleading, because if you look at the results from, players that are winning these cups, right? They're using attack-weighted, bespoken IV Pokemon. Some of the Pokemon they use are the high-rank, high-stat product Pokemon. It's not exactly one way or another, but for some species, based on a specific meta, it definitely can be one way more than the other. That's great, Ryan Swag, but you know what? Your breakpoints, they're inconsistent. You don't know what the IVs are of your opponent. They could be running anything. And therefore, you could miss your attack breakpoint. Or you could just get your attack breakpoint anyways. So I go with the rank 1 because it is consistently the rank 1. Well, there's a couple layers to this particular argument. First one is that as far as consistency goes, if you actually pay attention to my PvP IV guides, I kind of list out the range, the expected range of what you're going to be running into against your opponents. I'm not just doing simple matrix simulations on pvpoke.com comparing against the rank 1 and the default IVs. I do look at a lot of these matchups like really closely. In particular, I do my own special IV blends for the opponents, and I even scale up and down the attack and the defense and the HP weights of both the Pokemon I'm looking at and the matchups that I'm looking at for the Pokemon to just see how consistent a certain defense and HP check are, and just how likely you are for your breakpoint to hit, how much you can thrift on your attack weight and still reasonably hit the breakpoint, and how much attack you'd need to have that maximum consistency going on, right? So once again, it is a relatively complicated process, but when it comes to the swag IVs, like I try to look at as much reasonable and likely situations against the most reasonable and likely opponents as I possibly can. And then for the second layer to this, saying that it's inconsistent to have these IVs because, you might not get them or you might have them anyways because of your opponent's IVs. The whole thing is that I'm striving for consistency. So for a lot of my recommendations, it is very consistent that you'll get this attack breakpoint, that you will get this advantage, that you'll get this defense breakpoint, and your Pokemon will live long enough to reach another charge move in X scenario, right? So I do think there is a good degree amount of consistency when it comes to my Pokemon. To that end, I think that there is a degree of inconsistency when it comes to the rank 1. I mean, the rank 1 is consistently the rank 1, no doubt, but its performance is still also contingent to the same restrictions that the swag IV Pokemon have, where their performance is based on what the IVs of the opponent are. The difference between the swag IVs and the rank 1 is that the swag IVs are trying to do something purposeful with their stats, where the rank 1 is just, I'm the rank 1, I hope it works out that I'm the rank 1, where you got the rank 4 Noctowl, for instance, having more potential to get a breakpoint on Galarian Stunfisk and have a better advantage in that particular matchup. So I don't think it's exactly correct to say that the swag IVs are any more or less consistent than what the rank 1 is, but I do think that a lot of this sort of perspective is born from not really understanding how I approach the situation for my PvP IV deep dives, that I do look at, you know, energy advantage, energy disadvantage, shield disadvantage, prior damage, safe swap. Like, I try to consider all the realistic scenarios possible and, you know, look at them closely in simulation, so it's not just, you know, what PvPoke is saying is going to happen, right? So I do put a lot of time and effort into having that consistency. So to tell me that the results are inconsistent when they are consistent, and then you look at people topping these regional tournaments with things that fall in range of what I'm recommending in my PvP IV guides, like, what is the consistency then? Is it the stuff that I'm recommending and the stuff that's actually performing, or is it the rank 1 because it's the rank 1? It's got to be consistent, man. It's just not how it is. It's just not. So I'm not saying that the rank 1 is bad or invalid. Sometimes those stat checks do fall upon the rank 1. Sometimes the rank 1 does get lucky and they get a break point against a IV deficient opponent, right? But that doesn't mean that the swag IVs are less consistent or less good. Arguably they're better because they're consistently or more consistently doing specific jobs compared to the rank 1, which is just, once again, hanging it out there in the breeze, hoping it catches something. Will it? They don't know, but they do know that they're rank 1. I think at the end of the day, the most like valid point for stat product, and the one thing I will tell people many times, is that stat product is simple, and following stat product is, you know, efficient enough. It does work out well enough that if you don't want to get into all the nitty-gritty details about PvP IVs, then just following stat product is fine. Just using what you have is fine, right? But if you do want to get like all specific about it, you know, you can't really tell me that the swag IVs are worse than the rank 1. Just because you're not willing to put in the time and effort to really understand it and dig deeper in it, it doesn't mean that all the work I'm doing is invalid. And to that end, I try to make this like stuff as accessible as possible for people, providing, you know, lists of, you know, dozens to hundreds of PvP IVs that meet the specific stat checks. That way people have something better to work off of than just high stat product, because as we saw at the beginning of this video, high stat product doesn't really correlate with bulk, doesn't really correlate with anything as precisely as specific IVs would. Finding what those important significant IVs are is really difficult, so I try to do my best to make it easy for people to, you know, navigate, understand, and have access to. But if I don't have a PvP IV guide out, if some other, you know, guru or somebody on the internet isn't shouting out some important stat checks, well then what can you do, right? If you're not willing to put in the time and effort, and I don't think that's exactly a bad thing, not everybody has to be hyper crazy competitive about this game, then I think following high stat product is perfectly fine. It's perfectly reasonable to do that. I don't think that's invalid at all. But if you do want to take things a step further and maybe get a better glimpse of how well your specific IV Pokemon can, you know, perform in comparison to each other, you can do a basic PvP IV evaluation. I'm still like overthinking and procrastinating on my own PvP IV evaluation guide, but Though Tactical has a really good guide out there that emphasizes probably the simplest and most important point in PvP IV evaluation. So link in the description to Tho's video. Basically like the lowest time spent for the most amount of benefit when evaluating your own PvP IVs. Tho has a really good video on that. And should the day come that I finally work out a PvP IV evaluation video, I'll have that linked up above and in the description as well, so you can get the full cerebral Ryan Swag perspective on the whole thing. As I wrap things up here, I just want to establish once again that I'm not a rank 1 hater. I don't think the rank 1 is a bad investment or a bad Pokemon or anything like that. I'm just trying to argue against all the people that are telling me that my swag IVs are bad or second rate compared to the rank 1, when it appears that a lot of people really don't understand, you know, the full dynamics of the situation. So like the rank 1 is fine, and if you feel more comfortable with the rank 1, you want to build the rank 1 and use the rank 1, like I'm not going to stop you, man. But when it comes to the swag IVs, I don't think it's really fair to say that they're less or worse than the rank 1 just based on the misunderstanding of the situation there, right? So I'm not trying to condemn anyone, I'm not trying to talk down to anybody here. I'm just trying to kind of expand everybody's understanding when it comes to PvP IVs. I know it's not the most critical, quintessential element of PvP, but it is still a factor, and it is a factor that results in success, as we've seen with plenty of players using goofy IV spreads that definitely are not the rank 1 to win their tournaments, right? So yeah, just wanted to get it all out there and try to help people understand the situation a little bit better, right? Well, if you got any questions on this content, of course, comment below, let me know what's up, and I'll be happy to help you out. And if you enjoy this kind of content and you want to see more like it, well, make sure to subscribe to SwagTips. SwagTips. I'd also like to give a special shout out to these Patreon supporters. If you want to support Swagman on Patreon, link in the description. Why can't we be friends? Why can't we be friends? Why can't we be friends? Why can't we be friends?